we're going to switch over and we're going to welcome my friend Bruce McCarthy. Bruce has been involved in the product camp and product coffee or communities for as long as I can remember, and we've had the fortune, we've worked together both professionally when our companies were working together, and we've collaborated over the course of the last several years on product management topics, had some really good deep discussions, got together for beers a couple times, and I'm really excited to have Bruce joining us today and sharing some of his wisdom and experience with us as we talk about saying no to great ideas. So Bruce, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks a lot, actually, for that warm introduction, and thanks for having me. I could just tell from the introductions, this is my kind of audience, a bunch of product people, the different levels of experience, that's fine, but interested and passionate about the topic and about doing the right stuff for our customers and for our companies. And that's what prioritization is all about, is figuring out what that stuff is, right? What's the right stuff, not just any stuff that might be good. I've got a story to tell. I've got some slides to share. I've got a Slido for questions. I even have a prioritization scorecard template that I can send your way. And I'm hoping we'll have some time for just Q&A with the Slido as we go. But I'll start with the slides, if that's okay with you guys. So let me do that. Boom. Share and get over to the slides and press play and tell the system to get the right one on the right monitor. There. Are we seeing one slide right now? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Saying no to good ideas. Sounds counterintuitive, but it sounds like from some of the comments you guys get it. There are just too many good ideas. So we need a way to zero in on the best ones, on the really great ones. As Jason said, I've been involved in product camps and product tanks and conferences for many years. But before all of that, and overlapping with all of that, I also played a lot of roles at companies. Everything from head of product, gradually got there from lesser product roles, to also UX and engineering management and partnerships and agile enablement, and you name it. I've been officially or unofficially in charge of it at some point. And that sort of broad cross-functional view of things is what really drove, I think, some of the insights that ended up in this book that Jason mentioned, Product Roadmaps Relaunched. You can learn more about it at productroadmapping.com, or you can just follow Jason's link to the book on Amazon. I do highly recommend the paper version over the Kindle version. I mean, I don't care. I get paid exactly the same amount, which is not much either way. But we worked really hard on getting the layout just right in the book so that the paper version can be used as a kind of a guide. You can lay it open to one topic on your desk and use it as a reference while you're trying to get something done. So that's the background, but I want to talk a little bit about how my approach to prioritization evolved. And I want to talk about a particular experience that I had where it really crystallized for me. And that was my first month as head of product for a startup. This was Net Prospects. It was quite a few years ago now, and I think I was employee number 23. We had just raised a B round, and we were doing some hiring, and the executive team was well established other than me. I was the last member of the executive team to join, and the executive team was full of a lot of good ideas. In fact, so many, I went around in my first month and collected all the things that they thought that we were working on or would soon be working on or should be working on. And the list, even of high-level initiatives, was long, 73 different things that I collected on my spreadsheet. And I took a look at our team. Our dev team was at that time 5 people. So I thought, okay, how many things can we actually get done at this level this year? And it's nowhere near 73. It's probably in single digits. So how are we going to narrow this list down by 10x? How are we going to really find the ones that we must work on, rather than the ones that we probably should work on. And this made me think actually of this cartoon from, do you guys know the Product Management Journal from Product Focus in the UK? They did this cartoon based on a talk I did at Product Camp years ago. I had a bunch of quotes. These are mostly verbatim from my deck back at that time, from all the stakeholders around the business that are pointing their fingers at the product manager and saying, you should do this, you should do that. The CEO wants you to cram more stuff in. The customer support team wants you to fix the problems that the customers are complaining about. The marketing team wants you to answer the competitive threat. And this is kind of typical of being stuck in the middle as a product person of all of those requests and ideas and demands, sometimes. I felt that very keenly when I got there at Net Prospects. It felt like I was just overwhelmed. I've spoken to lots of product folks about this topic over time, and typical feedback I get is, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. My priority list is so long. I feel like it's impossible to get to all of this. And one person said, yeah, my challenge is actually to finish one thing before being pushed on to doing the next thing. And the priorities seem to change so fast that I can't even finish things, never mind keep up with the lengthening of the list. So I'd love to take 1 minute actually and ask you all to jump in on this Slido. You can go to slido.com and put in this hashtag, or you can use this QR code with your phone right now to take you straight to it. It's a simple poll, and just answer the question, what's hard about prioritization for you? And put in a few words, and we'll see what pops up in the word cloud. I should play Jeopardy music at this point, but I'll just give you 30 seconds and we'll see. Okay, there's a bunch already in the word cloud. What provides the most value, value estimation, vague requirements, funding, too reactive, wheat versus chaff, management wants, all caps, changing requirements, outcome focused, planning for the future, loudest voice is number one. Yeah, it's like everybody has challenges in this area. Measuring value, there's a lot of measuring value in there. Stakeholder priorities, solution, not problem requests. Yep. Chief strategy officers. I know a company who has one of those. Alignment. Yep, we're going to talk about alignment too. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges. I appreciate everybody weighing in here. Let's get into some principles for dealing with this. That's why we're here, right? Let me go back to the slides. The number one rule of prioritization has to do with opportunity cost. You have to recognize up front that you're never going to get to everything, so you've got to pick the most important things to work on first. And the way I sort of formulated in my head is to just always assume that I might have to stop at any time. Funding might dry up, the team might get diverted to something else, the strategy might change, and so I've got to deliver value as quickly and as early as I possibly can. I've got to do the most leveraged things so that I can demonstrate value and I can keep my team funded and on and focused. Because if I have a grand vision that might take me 5 years and I start building it in the most efficient way, I'm probably not going to deliver value quickly, and I'm probably going to fall victim to having my priorities changed for me, which would not be a good effect. So how do I do that? How does this dictate that I should act? Well, If you've got too many good ideas, sounds like it's fairly typical for people in this room, you've got to cherry pick the 10x ideas. You've got to say no to the merely good in order to be able to focus on those 10x ideas. It's less actually about saying no to good ideas than it is about saying yes to the really great ideas, to finding the wheat in the chaff. Um, and if you can really do that, if you can rally people around out of all of these good ideas, which ones are the really great ones, it's easier to get them to part with the good ones in the excitement of the great ones. The clue here on how to do it is about focusing on the outcomes, not the outputs. It's about focusing on the goals and the objectives and the results you want, and which of the ideas of things to do or outputs are most likely to get you there fast, to get you there before you're asked to stop in the inevitable game of musical chairs. So ideally, your objectives, your business objectives, the outcomes you're looking for are what drive your priorities. And in order to have that conversation with your stakeholders about the objectives, you kind of have to separate the wheat from the chaff in a way. You have to kind of separate means from ends. So often I ask people, okay, tell me, what are your objectives? And they say very concrete things. They say, well, we got to do a redesign. And I say, well, hang on. A redesign is not really an objective. It's a means to an end, right? What is it that you want to accomplish? Why do you want to do a redesign? What do you hope will happen? And they say, oh, well, our website is really kludgy and old, and people are leaving it because they don't find it very usable on their secondary devices like phones or iPads or whatever. So we want to retain customers and grow their lifetime value. Oh, okay. Well, that is the objective. Grow the lifetime value. And HTML5 redesign is maybe one way to ensure that customers stay with you longer, but it may not be the only way or even the best way. What about social integration? We want to make it so that it's really easy for people to tweet about what they're doing in our app. Okay, why do you want to do that? Well, we figure that our customers have friends, and if the friends hear that they're using our stuff, that maybe that will help us to expand and to grow. So, okay, that's the real objective, is growth. And similarly with customer requests, we need to respond to this request or that request from customers or prospects. Well, again, why do we want to do that? We might do that if we want to erect barriers to the competition and cement loyalty, say, with enterprise customers. But customer requests from SMBs or consumers, of which there may be thousands or millions, those individual requests probably don't make sense for erecting competitive barriers. People sort of start to get the message that I'm after business results, and they say, okay, it's all about revenue. We just want to grow revenue. And I say, okay, that's a start. That's moving in the right direction. That's an end rather than a means, but we can probably be more specific yet than just revenue. We can probably specify what kind of revenue. Is it recurring revenue? Is it new accounts? Is it creating a higher average sale price? Where do we want the revenue to come from? And if we can be more specific, we can have a better objective, which will be better for helping us judge the value of ideas for growing revenue. And then sometimes I also, especially if we're talking to if I'm talking with technical people, I get things like, well, a goal is scalability. We need to be able to scale. And I ask again, okay, so why do we need to be able to scale our app? And it's because we are experiencing high growth and high rising demand, and the scalability of our app is actually a limiting factor in the company's growth. So if we want to be able to fulfill more demand, we need to be able to scale and handle more simultaneous users, for example. On the right side, we have these business objectives. Oh, and my favorite one actually is, I had a CEO once, including at this company, British guy, who said, Bruce, what I really want is transformational ideas. And I had to ask him, okay, what does that mean? Um, and I tried hard to translate that into my framework of business objectives. And what it turned out that he really meant was we had some core IP that he thought could apply in other areas, that it wasn't just our current customer that might be able to take advantage of it, that we might be able to be disruptive as we were being in the marketing data business in other areas. And so he wanted to be able to leverage our existing assets in new product areas. And that made sense. And I was able to put it into my framework that way. Um, it turns out that you can derive an entire roadmap from going from the right side of this slide to the left. And I'll give you a real example. This is a company called Contextually, and this is a roadmap from 2017 that they really were working toward. And there's a bunch of things to do on it, and you can see the time frames across the top. But on the left, there are those percentages, and those are percentages of resources. They're squads that are working on things. And the next column over, outcome we are seeking, is about business objectives. The first three are all different ways of increasing ASP, or average sale price. The next one, improve long-term product usage, was about retention. The next one was about investing internally in the infrastructure, retiring debt, and so on, to be able to move faster. But the last one was increased percentage of new trials fully onboarded. That's conversion rate. That's conversion rate from free to paid. And those are the business objectives. And the entire roadmap is driven directly from those business objectives. So I boiled this all down to really three things. If you can have some clear objectives, if you can apply some simple math to comparing the ROI of different ideas to those objectives, and you can have a good substantive discussion with your stakeholders around the objectives and the math, it's pretty easy to come to aligned priorities. And that's exactly what happened at Net Prospects. I'll come around to exactly how we did it, but I'll start with this idea of the simple math. The simple math is embodied in what I call the ROI scorecard, or sometimes it's called the strategic scorecard. And shout out to Jason. He shared with me years and years ago something he calls the 60-second business case. And that my model is extremely similar to that. It's also similar to a method you may have heard of called the Rice method, but it's subtly different than both of them, I think, in an important way. So the ROI scorecard is very simple. The formula behind it is very simple. It's value divided by effort equals priority. That is, bang for buck equals priority. You should do the things that are the most leveraged, the things that deliver the most value for the least effort, or at least you should do them first. Because if you can start delivering that value quickly, as early as possible, then you begin to reap the value, the rewards of that value while you're working on the next priority. You can actually bootstrap yourself and fund your future efforts by starting to deliver value early on your number one efforts. Now, the magic is in defining the terms. I mean, it sort of makes sense, seek things with a higher ROI, but how do we define these terms? First, there is the effort. The effort is measured as the time and resources required to execute, to do the thing that you're proposing to do. And generally, in the software business, this is dev time, like how many sprints or how many story points or how many person hours or some measure of LOE, or level of effort. And I'll get to exactly what measures I like to use in a minute. But that's what we're talking about for that side of the equation. On the other side of the equation, you have value. And here, this is where I differ from Rice. The value is expected contribution to customer needs and business objectives, especially those business objectives. Rice basically says reach and impact. And I would like to define impact a little more, in a little bit more detail. If you can define your business objectives in the way that I showed in the previous slide, then you can essentially slot um, multiple business objectives into the value and score any given idea against, let's say you have three objectives, both you've got you want to grow market share, and you want to grow average sale price, and you want to improve margin. That's three separate business objectives. You can plug them all into the value side of the equation, and you can score your ideas against all three and add them up. And that forms the left side of the equation. The right side, you could have multiple different types of effort. Most of the time, it's just dev effort, but maybe there's a bunch of research you need to do, or maybe the sales team needs to hire a bunch of new people to pursue a particular initiative because it's going after a different segment. So you could consider those as well. And then I want to add one more term to the equation that I think is critical, and that I call it confidence. Confidence is your level of confidence or certainty that the particular scores that you've placed into your scorecard are correct. And that's important because sometimes it's just a crazy idea and you haven't validated that customers even want it. So you don't know if the value side of the equation is right. And so you might give it a low confidence until you're able to go out and validate it with customers, in which case it either dies and you take it off the list if really customers don't care, or if they really do care, then you give it a higher level of confidence and it's going to rise up in the score. Similarly with level of effort, if you've never spoken to a technical person about how hard this problem is to solve, then you don't have a high confidence in your effort scoring. Let me show you what this looks like in a concrete example. This is my made-up scoring for SpaceX for their I don't know if you saw a few years ago, Elon got up and talked about his roadmap to Mars. His idea is that it ought to be possible to create a kind of a regular round trip to Mars, to drive down the price of sending people and things to Mars radically to the point where people could afford to actually emigrate to Mars. And he said there are 4 essential problems to solve to get the price down to the point where people could afford it. And these are the 4: full reusability of the rocket, refueling in orbit, propellant production on Mars so you don't have to bring all of the propellant with you for the whole round trip, and the right propellant that has the right performance characteristics and can be manufactured from native materials on Mars. And if you think about the scorecard the way I outlined in the formula, it applies this way. Full reusability rises to the top because on a scale of 0 to 2, imagine there were 3 business objectives. It scores a 2 on all 3 of those business objectives. So, so 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6, and the effort level for that particular item is low at 1. And so 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6, divided by 1 is 6. So the raw score is 6. And let's say the confidence in these numbers is 75%. 75% of 6 is 4.5, and that's the derived priority score. All the other things score a little bit less well because either they have lower value to one or more of the objectives, or they are more effort, or both, or the confidence is lower. You'll see the confidence has a strong effect. The confidence in the last one, that we can figure out the right propellant, is low at only 10%. And so that really hammers that last one. So this allows you to get kind of a stack ranking of ideas very quickly by comparing them to value and effort and confidence. Now, what about this weird 0 to 2, and it actually even says -2 to 2 scale? I like simple scales when you are just trying to do prioritization, radically simple scales. My favorite scale is 0, 1, or 2, or the negative equivalents of 1 and 2. And that basically that breaks down to 0 is 2 is I expect, let me go back to this actually. 2 is I expect um, creating a fully reusable rocket to have a very large effect on, in this case, all of the goals. 1 is I expect it to have some effect, some significant effect, but I'm not defining exactly how much. 0 is I expect it to have a small or negligible effect on the goal, on the objective. It's basically small, medium, and large, but small is discounted to 0 because I don't care about small effects. Can anybody imagine why there might be negative numbers in a scorecard like this? Just speak up if you have an idea.
It would have a detrimental effect on the objective.
Exactly right, Jerry. So you could imagine that that sometimes you have objectives that can fight with each other, like quality versus quantity. We actually had that problem at Net Prospects. We had a database of crowdsourced marketing data, and we had lots and lots of submitted data, but we rejected a lot of it as unverifiable or poor quality. And we could have loosened up those quality standards and made the database bigger, but we didn't want to do that. So you can have negative scores when an idea might help with one objective but hurt another objective. Now, I've outlined that, and it goes into more depth in the book in chapter 7 on prioritization on this particular method. But I have to be honest with you, doing the scorecard by itself, if you just do it by yourself at your desk, and you don't share it with anybody, you just share the results, this is the priority, that's not even half the battle. In fact, it's kind of useless, because there's no use coming up with the best possible plan and the best possible prioritization if nobody's bought into it. As product people, you all know, we have a lot of responsibility. We have very little authority. We have very little ability to say, you must do what I tell you, because nobody works for us. The engineers don't work for us. The UX people don't work for us. The testers don't work for us. The salespeople don't work for us. Nobody works for us other than maybe other product managers. And so you've got to get buy-in on your priorities. And in fact, a lot of people actually hate this scorecarding method. I've had lots of arguments online because they say, well, your method is, false precision. And the method is artificial, and it can easily arrive at wrong conclusions. And shouldn't priorities be the result of deep, good conversation with your customers and your stakeholders, and then you can make a more easy decision? And I agree with all of that. And that's why I'm not going for false precision. The numbers are very round numbers, 0, 1, or 2. It's hard to get less precise than that. But the really important thing to do after you've done your sort of preliminary scorecarding thing is to use a scorecard like this as a tool for conducting conversations with your stakeholders, to unpack the logic of your thinking and their thinking and compare it, to compare disparate points of view to a common set of objectives. And this is what we did at Net Prospects. The first thing I did, after collecting the 73 things and realizing that there was a hard prioritization job to do, was to find out, well, okay, what are our business objectives? And fortunately, we had just been to a board meeting where the executive team had pitched this year's business objectives to the board, and they had been approved. And there were 4 of them, and they were crisp, and they were measurable, and they were real good business objectives. So I plugged them into my scorecard, and I began trying to compare all of these 73 ideas to those objectives and see how they came out. But I didn't do it as an academic exercise at my desk. I went around and shared my spreadsheet with all of those stakeholders around the business in a process I call shuttle diplomacy. Shuttle diplomacy is named after Henry Kissinger, the famous Secretary of State under Nixon, who negotiated a ceasefire in the Middle East in the early 70s by literally shuttling from the capital of Israel to the capital of various Arab countries to be the go-between, to be the negotiator that both sides would talk to when they wouldn't talk to each other. And being in product can be a lot like that. I actually don't recommend that you get directly into a big approval meeting of your priorities before you've done this. If you're in this core team of product or design or engineering, you've got all these stakeholders orbiting around you in the rest of the organization, all these other departments and the customers and the partners, and you need their alignment. You need their buy-in if you want to keep on the path. And so I recommend a two-stage process. First, you go one-on-one to each of these key stakeholders, chat with them, find out what their priorities are, find out why, and sit with them. I mean, literally take your laptop and sit down next to them and show them the scorecard and ask for their feedback on the scores. Ask for their help in deriving good scores and adjust the confidence levels if you don't agree. Then you can have the group meeting with the whole team after everyone has had a chance to weigh in. And I actually suspect, I recommend really specific language when you go and ask for people's help. You say, I've got a draft, work in progress set of priorities, and would you help me refine it? Not, here are the priorities, will you sign off? But I need your help to make these priorities better. I'm sure you have a point of view on what's important. And if you start the conversation off by, even before showing them the scorecard, asking them what they think is important and why, you're essentially doing kind of a customer interview, right? You're not talking about your product so much as you're talking about their needs. And then you can also zero in on the few items on that list of 73 or 152 things that they really care about, that they either think are great ideas or stupid ideas, rather than going through every line, which could be time consuming. So if you collaborate like that, a magical thing kind of happens. It's not your priorities anymore, it's our priorities. They co-created the list with you. And the result of that effect, the IKEA effect it's sometimes called, because people are proud of their IKEA furniture because they built it themselves, is that when you do get into that group approval meeting, it's much easier because everybody, instead of competing to poke holes in your plan and show how smart they are competing to take credit for the plan because they were all involved in the creation of it. And this is exactly what happened in my first month as VP at Net Prospects. I took the scorecard, put in the objectives from the board presentation, went around to all of the stakeholders and worked the problems and the priorities, used the math of the scorecard to ask why a lot. Every time somebody said, I think this is important, I would say, okay, which of these objectives does it contribute to and how much? And then we would do the scoring together. And how confident are we? What evidence do we have? A quick example that kind of proved why the model worked was that there were a short list of items that scored poorly, that several of the executives kept pressing on and saying, well, yeah, but it would be really cool, or it would create a lot of buzz, or it would get attention. And I said, well, that's not an objective. That's not one of the objectives we agreed on with the board. So I don't know why I would bump something up based on something that's not an objective. I mean, it sounds good, right? But it turned out, I finally got around to a one-on-one with the CFO, and he said, well, what the others are not telling you is that we're going for another round of funding very soon. And being in the press and having some buzz would help us with the valuation and with the raising of the money. And all of a sudden it made sense. I added an extra objective about raising money and added the scoring for that. And suddenly everything fell into perfect alignment. And everybody said, yep, that's right. And the things that were both buzzworthy and contributed to the other objectives were the things that really got pushed up to the top. And long story short, we had a a quick meeting of about an hour and a half with the executive team after the spreadsheet was all done. And we agreed on the priorities for the year, on the things that were must do and nice to do if we had time and not going to happen until sometime out in the future, in about an hour and a half. And the product manager who'd been there for 2 years before me just walked out of there slack-jawed because he had never seen this executive team come to alignment on any kind of priorities that quickly. He thought it was magic. I said, no, it's not magic. It's clear objectives, simple math, and a good discussion around those three things. We arrived at aligned priorities. That scorecard and those priorities stayed pretty much the same for the next 3 years, leading up to our acquisition by Dun & Bradstreet. And it was a good exit for all concerned. I'm happy to take more questions and dig into all of this in more detail about that story or about the scorecarding method. A few things for you before we do that. One is, if you like this and you're interested in more, my website is productculture.org, and you can sign up there for my One Thing on Product Culture nano letter. I call it a nano letter because it's weekly and it's really short. It's really as short as it looks in this screenshot, because what I try to do is get it to be on one screen on your phone so that you can read it while you're making coffee or getting coffee. There's that, and also we can go to the Slido, go back to the Slido and click over to the Q&A and add your questions or vote up other people's questions. And I'm gonna, you can again go to slido.com and put in that hashtag, or you can use this QR code. And then I want to put a link into the chat also for you. I have a quick chat, here we go. I have a quick link to a spreadsheet template, a Google Sheets template for that scorecard. You can feel free to make a copy of it. It's view only, but you can make a copy of it and modify it as you like. There's both a blank tab and an example tab from a recent workshop, if that's helpful. All right. I'm going to go over to Slido and see what questions people have. Okay, that's the poll. I don't want the poll, I want the questions. Here we go. Okay. Somebody said productupturn.org. It's productculture.org was the link, I think. Maybe upturn.org sounds good. So I can see that. Okay.
And I'm adding a link to the resources page as well, Bruce.
Great. Okay, I'm looking at the questions as they come in. Feel free to vote up other people's questions as well. A question with one vote is, tips for consistency on rating value and confidence if multiple product people are prioritizing. As an example, I've seen one person's confidence versus another can vary. That's right. So first, a lot of people are tempted to set specific ranges for the numbers. Like if it's revenue, then a 1 is above 100K and a 2 is above $1 million or something like that. And I would resist doing that unless you absolutely have to, because that actually is getting toward, I think, a sort of a false precision. When you're prioritizing, you're not actually trying to do a sales forecast or a project plan with dates. You're just trying to figure out, is this more important than that? Is this more likely to give us the boost that we're looking for than that? And that's all. So you don't need to be precise. And the estimates are all relative. And so my scorecard of the things that I'm trying to prioritize and your scorecard of the things you're trying to prioritize actually don't need to be consistent unless we're competing for the same resources, which is obviously not the greatest idea. If we are competing for the same resources, if we're trying to judge the initiatives of multiple product people together in one backlog, then I would make one spreadsheet. And I would conduct the customer interviews, the stakeholder interviews, and the scoring together so that you agree on it. And when you can't agree, I would reduce the confidence level and ask yourselves, what will it take to unblock this, to get the confidence level in our scoring higher? That's what I would do about consistency, is either do the work together or don't worry about it. If it's my backlog, I'm prioritizing it, and if it's your backlog, you're prioritizing it, and they don't have to be consistent. It's like story points in that way. They're not really comparable. Okay, next question is, after the shuttle diplomacy, you have to formalize the decision to everybody. You do that by email or meeting. Well, it depends a little on your organization, but I like to do both. After the shuttle diplomacy, we had a meeting, we discussed it, and there are a lot of other considerations besides the pure scoring for what order things will actually be taken in. The scoring is the first input, and I think the most important, so you know which things rise to the top and are worth talking about. But at that point, you may need to start thinking about, well, which one of these are practical to do when, given resources, given dependencies, given promises that may have already been made to third parties like the board, or contracts in place or things like that. So I usually leave room, as you'll see in the scorecard, for comments on each row, so that after the prioritization is done, you can use the comments about those dependencies as a way to finalize the priorities or the order in which you're going to do things. Then basically it becomes either your roadmap, and you would publish it that way, or on a smaller scale, your squad's backlog. At that point, that's what it is it's your roadmap or your backlog, and that's how I would memorialize it, and that's how I would share it. I do favor publishing roadmaps, as you'll see in the book, and I favor publishing them by having a meeting where you talk it through after the decisions are made, and emailing it out to people. One of my favorite people, Sam Clemens, who ran Insight Squared's product team for many years, would publish a PDF of his roadmap every month, an updated version with changes annotated and reasons why. And he would have a full all-hands meeting to go over it at least once a quarter. It was a quarterly roadmap. Okay, confidence. How do you measure confidence? I use a percentage, but how do you decide, right? The confidence is your confidence as a PM that your other scores are correct. That is, that there really is the amount of value that you scored, and it really is the correct level of effort. Like I said earlier, if you haven't really looked into it and you're not positive that it will drive, say, revenue, your business objective, or customer satisfaction, say that's another business objective, then if you're not sure because you've never talked to a customer about these things, well, then your confidence is going to be low. It's going to be like, seems like a good idea, but we better check. And so confidence might be 30, 40%. But if you've done 10 customer interviews and this thing keeps coming up as a problem and for customers, and you have a solution that they seem quite enthusiastic about, well, then your confidence in the value is probably pretty high, 80, 90%, that if you can do this right, it will be valuable. Now, the tricky bit is the confidence, the way I've formulated it, applies both to the value side of the equation and the level of effort side of the equation. And you may have very different confidences in those two. You may have done all the customer research, but you haven't talked to engineering about feasibility yet. And so you've got to average those numbers. And it would be possible to apply separate confidence to each different factor in the equation, each different objective, and the level of effort as well. But that's kind of complicating the formula and the math. And because the real utility of this thing is not dictating your priorities, the real utility is facilitating conversations with your stakeholders where you can break out the math or the thinking into discrete components in a semi-objective way. You don't want to make the formula complicated. You want people to be able to do the math instantly in their head so they see why things score the way they do. If they can't do the math in their head, they won't trust it. So beware of waiting, or there is a version of this that I've done on request that has weights on the different business objectives. But to be honest, they don't, when you have as simple a scoring range of 0, 1, or 2 as we do, the weightings tend not to make much difference in how the priorities actually come out, and they just make the math harder. So I'd be very careful about that. Were there any more specific questions about confidence, or did I answer it? Put in another question if I didn't answer.
No, that was great.
Okay. Should themes be treated as outputs or outcomes? Love that question. Somebody's read the book. So themes, for those who haven't, in the language that we describe in the book, are the guts of the roadmap, but they aren't the features. They are the needs of the customer that might result in features, or might result in a better documentation or a better onboarding process or some other way of solving that need. So themes are needs, wants, problems to be solved, jobs to be done. Doesn't really matter what formula you use. All of those are ways of describing the problem, not the solution. The problem solved by a mobile phone beyond the feature phone is mobile access to the data that I want on the internet, right? I can get it anywhere. The solution is a smartphone. So the themes are the problem to be solved, and those are the guts of the roadmap. And in fact, that's my favorite thing to put into the prioritization scorecard, is let's put a list of customer problems to be solved or jobs to be done into the scorecard, and let's say, if we solve this problem well, how much is it worth to our business objectives? And level of effort is harder to do when you're ranking problems because you don't know the solution. But you can ask yourself, how hard is this problem to solve? How complex is the problem? And you can score based on that basis. In that sense, themes are outcomes. They are customer outcomes as opposed to business outcomes. The business outcomes are the objectives at the top of the scorecard, and the customer outcomes are the themes. I wouldn't mix themes and features in the same scorecard because there's apples and oranges. So do a scorecard that ranks all your themes or your problems, and then once you've settled on the 2 or 3 problems you're going to go after, do another scorecard of possible solutions to each of those, say, 3 top problems for the customer that you're going to solve. And you may have a list of 5 or 10 options for each of those problems, and you want to be able to score those to see which ones you should pursue first. So confidence equals gut feeling. Yeah, that's fair, you know. That is fair. It is a bit of a gut feeling, and you can use it as a PM as a fudge factor. This is important for you to have because you're going to be dealing with stakeholders who don't inherently agree, and they may not agree with you, and they may not agree with each other, and so you want to be able to use it either as your gut check or as your SOP to the stakeholder to get alignment. You know, you may not, it's really up to you finally to put the scores down and not just to do what the stakeholders say. It's your judgment and your responsibility at the end of the day to set that initial input of priorities into the planning discussions. But you've got to be able to show to your stakeholders that you are listening. And if you're not willing to change from a 1 to a 2 on, say, a business objective, despite objections, you might be willing to reduce the confidence because maybe you're wrong. And maybe you need to do a little bit more research to find out objectively which of you is right. Did I cover that right? Cover that, whoever, Jay, that wrote about gut feeling? Did I answer your question? Jay, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Have you had to use the ROI scorecard for different product lines with different objectives? If so, how? Yes. I've been using a version of this since I think probably around 2005 or 6 when I was at ATG. So I used it in enterprise e-commerce platforms. I used it in the marketing data at business at Net Prospects, and I've used it with dozens of other clients since in loads of different industries: B2B, B2C, large, small, early stage, mature. And the reason it continues to work is it's basically an ROI calculation, and you can plug in the variables that are relevant to this particular company and this particular product at its stage of life. In fact, I don't have a slide for it today, but there really are a fairly limited number of possible business objectives. About 10, I think. And they fall into 3 broad buckets that have to do with the product life cycle. So just a quick diversion on this. As we all know, the product life cycle basically goes from early stage figuring it out, pre-product market fit experimentation, to a growth phase after you hit product market fit, to a mature phase where growth is difficult, but we're going for profit, hopefully, to be able to fund the next big thing. And so in each of those 3 stages, early development, growth, and maturity, there are just a few different business objectives. In fact, those 3 are the large objectives. Get to product market fit is a business objective, growth is a business objective, and profit in the mature phase is a business objective. And those can break down into more specific things like gross margin versus net margin, for example, as business objectives. And in growth, there are a number of different levers you can pull to grow. It can be growth in customers, that's one axis, or it can be growth in revenue, or it can be growth in share of wallet or average sale price, or it can be growth in market, like we go from just covering North America to also covering Europe. There are a number of different axes there too. So it's very flexible if you adjust which business objectives you're using in the formula. And in that way, I find that it's more flexible and more, well, I hate to use the word precise, but more applicable to a particular situation than rice, if that makes any sense. How to deal with those that throw a wrench into the scoring method. I love this. A lot of the time I get the question, isn't it possible to game the system, especially with the confidence number being a fudge factor? And yes, it is possible. But the only way I know of to avoid that is to have one person, the product manager, be the final arbiter of the priorities. When you go around and you do your shuttle diplomacy, you're not collecting votes. You're collecting advice. You're collecting input. You're collecting participation. But in the end, somebody is still making the decision. It's not a democracy, but it's not a dictatorship either. It's leadership, in my opinion. And so, yeah, you're going to get the person who says, you know what, I fundamentally disagree with everybody else on what's important, and they're going to argue and argue and argue. And I encourage you to actually give them an ear, hear them out, and help them feel validated that you were listening. Don't just argue with them. In fact, I wouldn't argue with them at all. I would let them have their say and make sure they feel that you listened. That doesn't mean you have to say yes to what they say. It might be good to throw them a bone here and there with the confidence level, but it doesn't mean you have to say yes. At the end of the conversation, what you're asking for is not their agreement, but their alignment. That is, not that they think that the priorities are correct in the sense that that's exactly what they would do, but that the priorities are something they can get behind, something that they can disagree and commit to use Amazon terminology. And that's what we got with that executive team at Net Prospects was we didn't all agree. There was not a consensus, but there was alignment. Okay, yes, I think this is important, and in my opinion, it's more important than this other thing, but they're both on the list, so it's okay. Or I think that this is the most important thing, but this other thing is really important, so I'll wait until next quarter, and I'm willing to go along in order to just have a decision, and that's alignment rather than consensus. Productupturn.org, was that a specific question or suggestion?
That was earlier trying to capture your website address.
Okay, product culture, and you can see the logo right here.
Yeah, it was a autocorrect error. Sorry.
Yep, no problem. Okay. How do metrics influence in objectives for prioritization? Really good question. If you're using OKRs or KPIs or some other metrics, think about which of those might actually be business objectives for your prioritization. If you've got KPIs like uptime that you're not meeting, or you've got metrics like margin that you're trying to meet, then those could possibly be business objectives to plug in, or they could be related to business objectives to plug in. Whoever anonymous put this in, do you have a particular metric or two that you are following and did you want to ask about?
Not really, Bruce. It's more like a general question because once you work through the prioritization and you start the execution and the delivery, right? You have an expectation of how to measure success,
yep,
right, or effectiveness of what you just delivered. And based on that, how does this feed back into the priorities, back
Gotcha.
into the objectives for the next set, as you mentioned, during a quarterly review or quarterly planning cycle, right? How do these metrics play to probably shift something that was at the top of the queue and now
right,
based on the metrics not that relevant anymore?
I gotcha. So given that we prioritize things based on business objectives, those outcomes that we want from these outputs, then it's perfectly logical to tie any initiative, whether it's a problem to solve or a potential solution, back to those business objectives to judge its success in the market. So we decided that we were going to make some changes to our welcome page because we wanted to increase our conversion from landing to signing up, right? And so we have a baseline number and our business objective is to improve that. Well, let's release the changes and let's measure and find out, did we actually increase the sign-up rate or did we hurt it? In which case, that roadmap item is actually not done. We have to go back and redesign it until it gets the business objective that we want. As you say, exactly, you have a way to judge whether you've been successful with that thing. And in fact, that's the kind of the basis of the dateless roadmap, the now, next, later style of roadmap, which is one of the options we discuss in the book, is that it's results driven rather than date driven, which is key. And that's why I like the scorecarding method in particular for tying things together with OKRs and tying things together with a dateless roadmap. Okay, I'm glad somebody's happy with the fudge factor, Jay. And last question, it's 9 o'clock, so if anybody needs to go, but feel free. But let me cover this last one. Does scoring of solutions, second scorecard, use the same formula as scoring of themes, first scorecard? Largely, yes. The exception is that on the value side of the equation, in addition to the business objectives, I would add an additional term in the value, and that is how well we think this solution will solve the customer's problem. And if it's trying to solve more than one customer's problem, you might have more than one of those. So instead of, say, 3 business objectives, or 4, you might have 2 business objectives and 2 customer objectives, or maybe, 1 and 2 or 1 and 3, so that you're considering not just will it make us money or gain us customers, but does it solve the customer's problem? At least your guess as to whether it solves the customer's problem. Because to be honest, and this is a good way to wrap this all up, all of these numbers that you're putting into the scorecard are guesses. Any attempt to predict what will the customer value, what will drive revenue, what's hard, what's easy, is an educated guess. And the best we can do is try to get as educated as possible and align the organization around those guesses, and then go test them. And that's the whole thing. Prioritization is really about alignment, and the scorecarding method is about getting to that alignment. It's a tool for getting to that alignment.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bruce. This has been a great session, and I knew it would be. And I want to really thank everybody for the great questions that we had as well. Check out Bruce's website, productculture.org. Read the book, Product Roadmaps Relaunched. It's a great book. And don't forget to star the Google Doc where we've been capturing some insights and thoughts from today's session, so you can save it off into your own Google Drive and have access to those references. We've added some additional resources to that throughout the session today. If you would please, everybody, make sure that as you're walking away for the day, you'll get an email in a few minutes for our survey, our weekly survey. And at the end of every month, we give away a book to somebody who's completed the survey over the course of the month. We'll be doing that drawing tomorrow. So make sure that you fill out that survey. Let us know what you thought about the session. Give us some suggestions for things you'd like to see in the future. We'll put that information to good use, and you might win a book from the Product Coffee bookshelf. And it is now 9:03. I want to once again thank our guest, Bruce McCarthy. Bruce, it's been a fantastic session. Lots of great stuff here. Thank you so much for your time and your constant attention to the community. Yeah, absolutely. And we will see you all in 2 weeks on July 14th as we come back and go deep on the Kano model and how to use that in the real world. So looking forward to seeing everyone back here then for that. And until then, have a great couple of weeks and have a great rest of your week. Bye.